The Trump administration is willing to accept a recession to accomplish what they want. In this video, we've not only got to talk about what Lutnick just said, but also Canada's retaliation or new retaliation and what this could mean going forward for the stock market, recession, CPI this morning, everything together. We're going to talk about it. Let's get started with this.
Will these policies be worth it if they lead to a recession, even a short-term recession?
These policies are the most important thing America has ever had.
So it is worth it.
It is worth it. I don't think the only reason there could possibly be a recession is because of the Biden nonsense that we had to live with. These policies produce revenues. They produce growth. They produce factories being built here. You're seeing the announcements. I went to...
All right, so let's break this down. First of all, I have to give Lutnick an A+ for being a salesman for Trump. But I'll tell you, if we go into a recession, these announcements of factories being built and investments coming into the United States from Apple or other companies, they're just that, announcements. Capital expenditures get cut in a recession. So Mr. Lutnick, respectfully, if we fall into a recession because consumer spending nosedives, and I'm not saying we definitely will, but if we do, those investments are going to get put on pause. And ironically, it might end up being the next administration, that is 4 years from now, that ends up picking up the benefits of those. It's sort of like the irony that when Donald Trump lost in 2020, a lot of us joked on this channel. We said, wow, wouldn't it be crazy if for some reason inflation didn't end up being transitory? We ended up having a lot of inflation and Biden got blamed for it all. And then all of a sudden Trump came back in right around the time that inflation was starting to settle back down again. Gee, wouldn't that be crazy? Well, as Elon Musk likes to say, usually the most ironic outcome is what happens. And that's exactly what happened, which is just like, wow, okay, that's mind-blowing. Isn't it then also possible that there's this weird irony that, yes, Donald Trump could set up tax cuts and a lot of investment into America, but those investments don't actually come to fruition until after Trump leaves office and potentially after a recession, given the willingness of the Trump administration to endure a recession. Now, I don't know that we are primed for a recession immediately. I think data is clearly signaling slowing, and a lot of people are suffering and feeling like we're already in a recession. Data doesn't say we're in it yet, but that's okay. The data usually takes a while to say that we're in it. The real issue is the pH balance of the United States economy is starting to turn ugly. Goldman Sachs says macroeconomic signals are clearly slowing. And we're seeing those price reductions on future targets for the S&P 500, and we're seeing those increases in odds from JP Morgan and others over recession risk. BCA research suggesting a 70% chance, JP Morgan revising up to about a 30%, Goldman up to about a 40% chance. These are all risk factors that our economy will have to manage, in addition to the turbulence that we would get from Canada. Now remember, yesterday Canada imposed a 25% electricity tariff on exports of electricity from Canada, from the Ontario province. Yesterday, I estimated that this was worth about $1 to $4 per $100 of electricity that people in New York, Minnesota, and Michigan pay. In other words, it's a very, very small tariff. The 25% of a small number works out to $1 to $4 per $100. Tiny, tiny tariff. So Canada yesterday withdrew those tariffs. And if you were looking at X.com at all, you saw a lot of people on X cheering how Donald Trump just crushed the Canadians and beat the Canadians. The tariffs, folded right over in Canada as Trump came in and said, we're doubling your steel and aluminum tariffs. I looked at this with suspicion, as I usually do. I look at everything with suspicion. I try to give you unique perspectives. I was looking at this yesterday. I go, those electricity tariffs weren't worth it. Keep that in mind. Those electricity tariffs were so small. They had such a tiny impact on Americans, whereas the doubling of 25% to 50%, the aluminum and steel tariffs, were worth tariffs on essentially $10 billion of infrastructure in industry. That's bad. Those are a hit. So Trump's response was significantly larger in response to those electricity tariffs. So Canada says, all right, let's get rid of those tariffs. Cool, Trump's big tariff goes away. Now, what does Canada do? They come out with some real tariffs. This morning, Canada just announced a 25% matching tariff against items like steel, aluminum, cast iron products, computers, and other products against the United States. Now we're actually hitting over $20 billion of industry. Not a little bit of an electricity surcharge. We're actually hitting a real portion of U.S. industry. And Canada is announcing that they are planning to raise tariffs in coordination with European allies. This is what I warned about a few days ago when I said the biggest concern that we have is not what Sarah Eisen says on X, which is, oh, Mexico versus the United States, they don't have the cards. Oh, Canada versus the United States, oh, they don't have the cards. The biggest risk is actually a coalition of all of the people that we are upsetting in America with these uncertain tariffs and these make everything equal again tariffs. That's at least the argument. Which I like to, it's a bad name. Please leave a comment with a better name, but I call it NAFTA, like not the United States. Again, it's a terrible name, but a coalition of China, Mexico, Canada, and Europe. All of those economies together are very powerful against the United States. It's very easy to say one-on-one we win. All of them together becomes a problem. Now, keep this in mind as well. Lutnick's thesis is clearly one of populism and one that makes logical sense if you believe that economically it could be achieved. Let me rephrase this in a simple way by showing you the clip of the passion that he gives you 9 minutes into the video with Face the Nation. I just need you to know, going into what you're about to hear, economically and historically, okay, so I'm not trying to, say that the Trump administration's poopy-doopy or this, that, or whatever. I'm just trying to give you facts, okay? I try to stay in the middle politically because I just want to arm you with knowledge. I want you to look at the 1930s. The only thing we ended up achieving was massive anti-Americanism. Other countries leaving the gold standard after the tariffs that we applied, not only in the early 1920s, the mid-1920s, the late 1920s, the early 1930s. Oh my gosh, we're in a Great Depression now. What is the first thing that FDR tries to do? Let's remove all the tariffs and go back to free trade because we've exported so much anti-Americanism and growth has collapsed. This is bad. Mind you also that when Argentina, first of all, they didn't start a trade war with everyone, but when Javier Milei, chainsawed spending in government, the first thing that happened is a recession. They immediately plummeted into negative GDP the next year, after Javier's election. Now, this was necessary. Javier Milei, they didn't have a country anymore, right? People say that in the United States as well, but we are nowhere close to the hyperinflation that Argentina was facing. You're talking 3,000% inflation, whatever. Okay, maybe not that high in Argentina, but it was substantial. We had substantial currency devaluation and inflation for Argentina. So what we look at is, historically, tariffs are an economic bad. They don't level any playing field. They make things worse. Okay, we know that, and markets know that. That's what history teaches us. Lutnick does make a good argument, though, that Americans are suffering. And this is true. Both of these things can be true. It can be true that Americans are suffering and that tariffs are bad. Except Lutnick assumes that tariffs will make the American suffering less bad. But the reality, and this is the irony I want to talk of, is that if you take the lessons of history, tariffs will actually make the suffering worse before things get better. And this is why I think there's this irony that it is possible. These tariffs drive us into a recession. You actually have people in a worse situation. Rather than just auto manufacturers not having jobs, now all of a sudden 20 million Americans don't have jobs, and other people see their business sales decline because there's a recession. Now all of a sudden everybody's suffering versus just one industry of individuals who are outcompeted, unfortunately, by lower wages in places like in Mexico and Canada. That's globalism. Now, of course, this is where the Trump administration, people like Lutnick are like, oh, the globalists are bad. That's fine. You could argue against everyone else, but a capitalistic economy looks for the cheapest way to produce. Because what happens, and Lutnick doesn't mention this, but what happens when you're able to produce a Chevy truck in Canada cheaper than you are in America? What happens? You get to buy a cheaper Chevy truck. All Americans have access to lower priced vehicles Yes, some Americans lost their jobs to Canadians, but all Americans get cheaper vehicle access. So this is why economically tariffs are generally seen as bad and free markets are generally seen as good because they lower costs for everyone. Free markets are truly deflationary. The only reason we actually experience inflation in an economy is because we print so much money, and we'll continue to print money because it encourages more spending and lending. All right, and it's politically popular too. Let's listen to the passion here, though. You can't argue his passion. His passion is right on. Economically, like, this is why I said at the beginning of the video, he's a great salesman, an economic dunce.
I want to cry. Why? Why is it 7 years lower? It's not the air we breathe. It's not the food. It's not
7 years lower is just a reference to why is the life expectancy of somebody with a high school degree 7 years lower than somebody who doesn't, somebody who's like college educated. He does give a impassioned answer here. And I actually agree that our school system sucks. You know that. I ran for governor on fixing our schools.
not the medicine. It's despair. If I move your factory where your grandfather worked and your father worked and you plan to work, and I move that factory to Canada, your life is ruined. Drugs, alcohol, and suicide. And then fentanyl comes in and finishes the job.
I hear what you're saying.
Great salesman. And so him saying this, first of all, I know there are people going, right on, man. I'm pissed my family's jobs went to Canada. Rightfully so. You deserve to be pissed. But is the solution careening us into a recession to apply what history has already told us is, quite frankly, stupid, economically dumb? And this isn't to argue that, oh, we shouldn't have fair trade. We should have free trade on all angles. Wielding tariffs as a way for to achieve free trade historically just doesn't work. But again, we're just referring to the fact of history and trying to apply. Who knows? Maybe this time will be different.
Donald Trump is going to end it. He's going to rebuild those communities. He's going to rebuild it. And you know the statistic you're going to see that's going to make the most difference? The average life expectancy of our workforce is going to be equal. And that is going to be because they're going to have a better life under Donald Trump.
How are you going to convince manufacturers to bring factories back to the U.S. if you don't show them consistency, that you have a tariff plan and it's not going to change tomorrow or the next day, but it's a well thought out plan and it's going to remain in place?
Donald Trump said from the beginning, reciprocal tariffs. How you treat us is how we will treat you. What people don't understand.
But then he said it's all open for negotiation, and if somebody brings him a deal, he might pull it off.
No. Reciprocal tariffs are the baseline. And the countries of the world, like Europe, has a 20% VAT.
Yeah, countries like Europe. Oh, Lutnick. Okay, we get it. Yes, other countries have tariffs on us, and some of Trump's work, some of it, will lead to lower tariffs in other areas over time as we get closer to free trade. Maybe we just have to break a bunch of stuff and then sit down like mature adults and get free trade everywhere. Maybe this is a means to an end. And I think this is why Lutnick says, hey, if we have to go through a recession, it's worth it. The irony that I see as a high possibility if this sort of ridiculousness kind of keeps going on in markets is we actually end up inducing a recession that causes so much damage to Americans over the longer term. I don't think this is going to, like everybody in 05 is like, oh, it's going to be a quick recession. In hindsight, it actually was, 18 months. It's just not that bad of a recession, the financial crisis in terms of length. Dot-com bubble was worse at 3 years. And then, of course, you've got, lost decades like what you saw in Japan or the Great Depression where you've got a whole decade of loss. Or if you bought stocks at the peak of the bubble and the AI bubble, Freudian slip of the dot-com bubble, it took you 10 years to make your money back. That was just to make your money back, not to make a return on your money. But anyway, the irony here is that there's so much damage that's caused that people actually end up electing a bunch of Democrats because they recoil against the policies that have occurred here. You get a Democratic sweep in 4 years. And then all of a sudden, the lower tax benefits and the corporate investments coming out of a recession end up supporting growth again in the American stock market and for jobs and people. And then, that again could be an ironic outcome just because of the turbulence that's created from things like these tariffs. Now, JP Morgan had an interesting argument this morning, and I talked about it with my course members and as we wrote our alpha report out. We talked about how there's a likely move to fade any rallies, and we want to be careful of this. So JP Morgan's like, hey, it's too much uncertainty. Any bump you get in the stock market, fade it, sell it. It's interesting. We were sitting in our course member live stream this morning, and as the bell hit, I said, watch Tesla go to 250. Do not buy it at 250. Hashtag not personalized financial advice. But don't buy a put right before. Wait for a little bit of a breakout, and then you'll see a fall. That's usually how this trade plays out. And this is all before it actually happened, right? And then what played out? Oh, how interesting. We broke out. You don't want to buy it before because then you get stopped out. You buy it when you lose. And sure enough, you lost this whole range here. You went to retest and you could have played the game again. So lines are at play again. These are the things we like to talk about in the course member live streams. In our alpha report, we kind of go through our historic volatilities and trade ideas for the day. But anyway, well, another thing that we analyzed is we said, look, the NASDAQ is up, 1.8% at open. And I look, it's extremely rare for the NASDAQ to close up more than 2.5%. And so I argued there was more downside ahead at open than there was upside because there's just a ceiling that we're going to hit on NAS growth. It usually just grows slower. And sure enough, that so far that's what happened. That's happened. But these are, again, join us in the course member live streams. By the way, many of you were asking for, and we're probably going to release it within the next day or two, sort of like a 1-month trial option where you pay a very small amount just to see, like, is it right for you? Or maybe a monthly option. We're still working the kinks out on exactly what we want to offer there. I'm taking your feedback, so leave me a comment with what you want. I'm trying to make sure we can provide great value while also having it be accessible. So consider that. Leave me a comment. So, what else? Well, Merrill is actually very bullish, which is interesting. See, Merrill, formerly Merrill Lynch, now at Bank of America, Merrill suggests that the tailwinds of our economy still support large companies. They cite global economic activity is picking up. They say that manufacturing is moving back into recession, though they don't acknowledge that manufacturing is moving back into expansion, though they don't acknowledge that the reason manufacturing might be moving back into expansion is because of the pull forward of tariffs. No mention of that at all, which kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit. How could you miss that? But anyway, they argue that consumer service spending, corporate investment, and manufacturing are supportive of expansion, that Europe is benefiting from Chinese growth, and that the broadening of the market is still alive and well. They see a healthy consumer, which I also question. And they recommend incorporate growth and value stocks, balance, and they're slightly overweight equities. Personally, when they have those sort of critical mistakes, by not at least mentioning the tariff pull forward, and I don't know where they're getting this idea that the consumer is presently still healthy, especially in the face of the write-downs that we're seeing from airlines, Kohl's, Best Buy, Target, Walmart. Like, these are all consumption warnings, and they're ignoring those. So it does sort of make me scratch my head and go, I don't know if I can trust y'all, but okay, whatever. Goldman Sachs is worried about credit spreads potentially widening. They suggest that could lead to a potential shock in the economy. And this is true. That is actually what we're most at risk of. Is not like, a day-to-day trend in a certain direction. We're at most risk, in my opinion, of some sort of substantial shock. A Japanese carry trade, some other black swan, and then that actually forces layoffs, which then pushes us into a recession. That's the greatest risk, in my opinion. I can't say that just tariff volatility is going to do that. And I actually don't think that markets, as I said on Monday when we had a lot of tariff volatility, I don't actually think that tariffs or the market is pricing in recession at the moment. I think that if we were pricing in recession, bond yields would be way lower than 4.3% on the 10-year. We're not, the market is not pricing in a recession right now. And the spread between the 2 and the 10 is like 32 basis points. It is not recessionary spread. Recessionary spread would be, 100 plus basis point spread, certainly at least 50, but more likely a shock to over that 50 to 90 range that I always talk about. And you'd have some large spike in credit spreads, not only the 2-10 spread, but also risk spreads, corporates. Topic for a different video. So we're not seeing that yet, which does mean if we need to price in recession risk, there's probably more downside because it's not priced in. But then again, maybe we won't have a recession. You know, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was on this morning. He goes, people are overreacting. There's no chance of a recession. All right. This is an interesting article. Tesla investor survey shows 85% believe Elon Musk politics are having a negative or extremely negative impact on the company. Small sample size on CBC. Whatever. You know, I was actually debating with Zero Hedge this morning a little bit on X. I encourage you to follow me there, just because when I see news updates, sometimes I'll throw things on there, and you know, that comes out sometimes a little bit before I can make a video on it. But what's interesting is, well, two things. Jim Cramer no longer allows replies on X, which I thought was kind of interesting. But if I go to replies, I replied to a Zero Hedge story here, where they said Tesla Q1 earnings should be strong, quite strong. And what they did is they put up this image here: buy Tesla, buy Rivian, buy a Lucid, buy a Mercedes, buy a Porsche, and they show this explosion of buy Tesla on the right. And I replied and said, sarcastically, obviously, if only there was a reason why buy Tesla could be soaring in Google or news results. And so I wrote, Trump buys Tesla. And you get the explosion. So obviously there's a heavy weight of these search results being skewed to everybody going, what, Trump bought a Tesla? Yeah, so that's a little skewing there. Now, Zero Hedge replies, if only there was a reason companies spend on marketing. And to that, honestly, like, touche. You know, I guess these things that you spending to buy advertising from the White House is a form of marketing. And in fairness, that is what I asked Elon Musk to do.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Why not advertise?
So, I mean, touche. Kevin, they're just doing what you asked them to do. They're advertising. I'm like, oh, damn, that's right. No, it's like, hey, you know, there's an old saying, no press is bad press, right? So there's no doubt you're getting a lot of press on Tesla right now. In fact, I'm pretty sure the Cybertruck, was it the Cybertruck X account just tweeted living in everyone's head rent-free. It's honestly kind of a good one. Take a look at this. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Living in everyone's head rent-free. It's true. Very, very true. And then, of course, you got AOC over here. Everyone needs to call their Democratic senator right now. They're starting to cave. Tell them, vote no on cloture. Vote no on the Republican spending bill. Today is the showdown. AOC wants the government to shut down. All right, AOC. So, yeah, wow. Well, quite interesting day, eh? Well, we'll see how it all goes. Thank you so very much for being here. Oh, Pokemon Go games unit sold to Saudis for $3.5 billion. Damn. Anyway, all right, folks. See you all in the next one. Appreciate y'all being here. Good luck out there. Goodbye.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.